in your hand so perfectly. It's like air, and the octahedron represents the air, and it's that form, that particular form, the octahedron. It just seems to fit. It flows through your hand, and it is like holding air.
Today we're here with Gill Southern. She was the winner of the 2013 Cuckoo Farm Graduate Award. You got a free studio for 1 year in Cuckoo Farm, and also this solo exhibition at the Minories Galleries. So I would like to know at first, how did you end up studying at the Colchester School of Art, and in which fields were you more interested during the program?
When I started, I applied to fine art. I definitely wanted to do fine art, and originally I was interested in print making, and I still am interested in print making, but I developed, and my work developed, and I evolved and became more and more interested in modern materials, contemporary materials, and resin, and 3D, and that's how I ended up working with resin.
And well, this exhibition has for title Endless Equivocation. And at first glance, when I saw this installation, it seems to me like very abstract, and also the title is very evocative, so it's open to many readings. But at the same time, if you take the pamphlet, you can read that there's a very concrete and specific meaning to this piece.
Yes. It's about the ambiguities that we hear continuously on the news from politicians, large institutions, banks, and the ambiguities, it's never quite as it first of all appears, and it's about the rhetoric that they use, and the transparency and the opacity of what they're saying. And we see the transparency and the opacity in the forms.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Because you relate also the number of cubes and colors with the number of squares on a chessboard.
There's 64 cubes, but it's being deconstructed. It's the game, but it's being manipulated and it's being manoeuvred constantly. And the cubes are representing the Earth, Plato's geometric solids. But of course, the rhetoric is the words seem to go into thin air. They're told to us, but it's never quite as it seems. And air is represented by the geometric solids, the octahedron. And I wanted to show this duality between the two forms. An octahedron would fit inside a cube, and a cube would fit inside an octahedron. So it's this continual repetition.
Because your work is very informed by ancient Greek philosophy, Plato, Aristotle, and also in previous installations you have already worked with octahedrons and cubes. Do you think are you going to carry out with these forms?
I do. I'm very interested in the Platonic solids and the elements that Plato designated to them. And finally, Aristotle designated the final, the dodecahedron. He said it could be the cosmos, the universe, and I'm quite interested in that as well. So it is about the Platonic solids. It's about rules and mathematics to a certain extent, and repetition.
You know, when at first glance, without reading the pamphlet, I thought about the existing dichotomy between nature and technology.
Yes.
I saw these shells in plastic there.
Yes.
And also now, you know, that with all these polemics surrounding Monsanto company, that most of the seeds on the planet they are manipulated genetically. So I thought in this like, oh.
And that links again to the duality, the opposites, the nature and man-made, and again it links with transparency, opacity, and cube and octahedron, and nature and man-made. So again, it's all these it's being pulled in different directions.
But at the same time, it's all embedded in only one piece.
Yes.
So the duality can conflate rather.
but deconstructed.
Deconstructed. So could you tell us something about the numbers, because some pieces have numbers inside?
This octahedron was my very first platonic form that I made. It's got 30 shells in there, and it all began. It was to do. This piece was called "It's Just a Shell Game," and it was inspired by an article that I saw in the newspaper talking about the politician's advisor's role working with this politician, and his so-called company was apparently just a shell game. And I thought, what is a shell game? And I realised it's not telling the truth. It's confusing for the public. It's a trick, and it's not a reality. It is pretense. And so I started to collect these shells, and I started to make rules, and I wanted them to be put into an octahedron because it was air, and it was like the rules, these words, and they're going to out into thin air. But each number of the shell is labelled, and then collected on a regular pattern every day, and then I would record it, and I would record the tide at the same time. They're in a book, recorded, and the drawing.
So were you creating at the same time your own game?
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
Yes. And I made rules. They had to be worn shells, they weren't whole shells, and they had to have smooth edges. They couldn't have any sharp edges. If they'd been snapped and they had a sharp edge, they didn't fit the rules. So, and they had to be collected every day, on each day of that November. So I had to go to the beach and collect it. I couldn't just collect them all in one day. That was the rule.
That's amazing. How do you come up with that rule?
It just happened. It just evolves, and it's just the way I like to work. I make rules. I have to make rules for myself as an artist. I always make rules, and then I work with those rules. Yes. And I observe this, and that's my way. I suppose I could say I'm an observationist. I observe what's happening from reading the news, reading the newspapers and watching the news. And then these observations I show through my work.
Yeah, and indeed, like, you could also come here and show a very explicative work, and very full of information, but instead you offer this beautiful piece, which is also in some way allows the visitor to create their own reading, and I think that's very that you have excelled in that.
Thank you. Aesthetics is important. The aesthetics, it has to be aesthetically interesting, even though my work evolves around rules and pattern. It always has to have something beautiful to go with it.
Here is, if in a chessboard you can see like the limits of the space. here you have decided to fulfill the space. Why?
When I laid out the board, the chessboard, I laid it out 64, 8 by 8 square, and then my plan was to deconstruct it because the information we're given is always distorted. It's not in its proper form. The information we're given is always distorted. I wanted this to be deconstructed and distorted and changed, the shape to be altered.